I'm so glad you're here with us today. We're diving deep into A Course in Miracles, and if you're just joining our community, you might be wondering what this course is all about. I'd love to invite you to check out the very first video on this channel, where I break down exactly what A Course in Miracles is, how it came to exist, and why it's been transforming lives for over 5 decades. It'll give you the perfect foundation for everything we explore together here. Today, we're going to talk about something that might shake the very foundation of how you see yourself. It's about independence, autonomy, and that fierce pride you might feel about being self-sufficient, about making it on your own, about not needing anyone. We live in a culture that celebrates independence as the ultimate achievement. Stand on your own 2 feet. Be your own person. Don't depend on anyone. These messages are everywhere, and you've probably internalized them so deeply that questioning them feels almost dangerous. But here's what A Course in Miracles wants you to consider. What if the independence you've been taught to value is actually a prison? What if the autonomy you've been striving for is keeping you isolated, anxious, and exhausted? What if everything you believe about being self-sufficient is actually the ego's most convincing illusion? We're in Chapter 4 of A Course in Miracles, called The Illusions of the Ego, and today we're exploring Section 2, The Ego and False Autonomy. This is one of those teachings that cuts right to the heart of the human condition. It exposes one of the ego's deepest strategies, the one that keeps you feeling separate, scared, and constantly on guard. Think about it for a moment. How often do you feel like you have to do everything yourself? How often do you resist asking for help because you don't want to appear weak or dependent? How much energy do you spend trying to prove that you're capable, that you're strong, that you don't need anyone? And underneath all that striving, have you ever noticed a quiet exhaustion, a loneliness that no achievement can fill? The ego tells you that you are separate, that you exist as an independent entity, disconnected from your source, disconnected from others, fundamentally alone in a vast and indifferent universe. And from that belief in separation, the ego constructs an entire identity based on autonomy. It says you must create yourself, define yourself, protect yourself, and prove yourself because there is no one else who will do it for you. This sounds empowering at first. It sounds like freedom. But if you look closely at your experience, you'll notice something else. The more you try to be autonomous, the more vulnerable you feel. The more you insist on independence, the more isolated you become. The harder you work to be self-sufficient, the heavier the burden grows. Because the truth is, false autonomy isn't freedom at all. It's a trap. A Course in Miracles teaches us that real strength doesn't come from standing alone. True power doesn't come from separation. Genuine freedom isn't found in autonomy, but in recognizing our eternal connection to our source, to each other, and to the love that created us. This isn't about becoming weak or dependent in the way the world understands dependency. It's about discovering that you were never meant to carry the weight of existence on your own shoulders. What we're exploring today has the potential to lift a burden you didn't even know you were carrying. It can transform your relationship with yourself, with others, and with God. Because when you understand the difference between the ego's false autonomy and the spirit's invitation to unity, you discover a peace that the world cannot give and cannot take away. Are you ready to question what you thought you knew about independence? Then let's begin this journey together. Let's start with the fundamental lie that the ego tells you, the one that everything else is built upon. The ego whispers and sometimes shouts that you are separate. Separate from God, separate from everyone around you, separate even from your own true nature. And from that core belief in separation, the ego constructs what it calls autonomy, what it presents as your independence, your individuality, your unique self. The ego says, you created yourself. You are who you made yourself to be. You are responsible for your own existence, your own identity, your own worth. And at first, this sounds empowering, doesn't it? It sounds like you're in control, like you have agency, like you're the master of your own destiny. The ego presents autonomy as the ultimate achievement, the pinnacle of human development. To be autonomous is to be free, or so the ego claims. But look closer at what this really means. If you created yourself, then you are also responsible for sustaining yourself. If you are truly autonomous, truly independent, then you are fundamentally alone. There is no source you can rely on, no connection you can trust, no foundation beneath you except what you yourself can build and maintain. Do you feel the weight of that? Do you sense the anxiety hidden beneath the ego's promise of freedom? The ego's version of autonomy is actually isolation dressed up as strength. It's loneliness disguised as independence. It's vulnerability pretending to be power. Because when you believe you are truly separate and autonomous, you also believe you are constantly at risk. You must defend yourself because no one else will. You must prove yourself because your worth isn't inherent. You must achieve because your value depends on what you accomplish. Think about how this plays out in your daily life. Maybe it's that resistance you feel when someone offers help, that voice that says, "I should be able to do this myself." Maybe it's the way you compare yourself to others, constantly measuring, constantly competing, because if you're truly separate, then every relationship is potentially a threat to your autonomy. Maybe it's that exhausting vigilance, always having to be on guard, always having to stay in control, because if you're really on your own, then letting your guard down is dangerous. The ego tells you that asking for help is weakness, that needing others is failure, that interdependence is loss of self. So you build walls, you maintain distance. You pride yourself on being self-sufficient, even as that self-sufficiency slowly crushes you under its weight. And here's the ego's most clever trick. It makes you believe that you want this autonomy, that you chose it, that giving it up would be losing yourself. The ego has convinced you that your separate identity, your autonomous self, is the most precious thing you have. It says, without your independence, who would you be? Without your unique separate self, you would disappear into nothingness. But A Course in Miracles asks you to consider something radical. What if you never were separate? What if autonomy is impossible because you were created by love, as love, in eternal connection with your source? What if the separate self you're defending so fiercely is actually the illusion, and your unity with all that is real is the truth you've been denying? The illusion of autonomy keeps you trapped in a prison of your own making, fighting for a freedom that can never truly satisfy, because it's built on a foundation of separation that was never real to begin with. Now that you understand how the ego creates the illusion of autonomy, let's talk about what this false independence actually costs you. Because there is a price for believing you're on your own, and you're paying it every single day, whether you realize it or not. The first cost is anxiety. When you believe you are truly autonomous, truly separate from your source, you live with a constant undercurrent of fear. Because if you created yourself, then you must also sustain yourself. If there's no power greater than you holding you in existence, then your survival depends entirely on your own efforts. Can you feel the tension in that? The exhaustion? You can never rest, never truly let go, because the moment you stop vigilantly maintaining your existence, you fear you might cease to be. This anxiety shows up in so many ways. It's the worry that keeps you up at night, running through all the things you need to control. It's the stress that tightens your shoulders as you try to manage every aspect of your life. It's that gnawing sense that no matter how much you accomplish, it's never quite enough. Because when you believe in false autonomy, enough is impossible. There's always one more thing to secure, one more threat to defend against, one more proof of your worth to establish. The second cost is loneliness. Real deep aching loneliness. Not just being alone, but feeling fundamentally disconnected even when you're surrounded by people. Because if you're truly autonomous, then everyone else is separate too. Every relationship becomes transactional. You can't truly let anyone in because that would threaten your independence. You can't be vulnerable because vulnerability means risking the autonomy you've worked so hard to maintain. You might have friends, family, even intimate partners, but there remains a wall, a boundary you won't cross, a part of yourself you won't share. The ego tells you this wall is necessary, that it's protecting you, that without it you would lose yourself. But what it's really doing is keeping you isolated in a prison of your own making. And then there's the exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness that comes from trying to be completely self-sufficient. Think about how much energy you spend trying to do everything yourself. How hard you work to maintain the image of capability, of strength, of not needing anyone. How much effort goes into appearing independent. Even when you're struggling, even when you're overwhelmed, even when you desperately need help but can't bring yourself to ask for it. The ego tells you that independence is freedom. But what you actually experience is the opposite. You become a slave to the constant maintenance of your autonomous self. You must continually prove you're worthy. You must endlessly defend your identity. You must ceaselessly work to establish your value. There's no rest in this, no peace, no moment where you can simply be without having to prove or protect or perform. Here's the ego's cruelest paradox. The more autonomous you try to be, the more vulnerable you actually feel. The more you insist on independence, the more you need to control everything around you. The harder you work to be self-sufficient, the more terrified you become of losing what you've built. Because deep down, some part of you knows the truth. You know you didn't create yourself. You know you can't sustain yourself alone. You know the autonomy you're clinging to is an illusion. And this knowledge, buried beneath the ego's insistent voice, creates a constant state of conflict. Part of you is exhausting itself trying to maintain false independence, while another part knows it's impossible. This internal war drains your energy, clouds your mind, and keeps you from experiencing the peace that is your natural state. The ego offers you control as a substitute for the power you've denied. It says, you can't rely on God, you can't trust others, but you can control your circumstances. You can manage your environment. You can make yourself safe through your own efforts. But control is exhausting, and it never actually delivers the security it promises. Because in a world of separation, there's always something beyond your control. Always a threat you can't manage. Always an uncertainty you can't eliminate. This is the cost of false autonomy, constant anxiety, profound loneliness, endless exhaustion, and the futile attempt to control a world that was never yours to control in the first place. Now, we arrive at the most liberating truth that A Course in Miracles offers. Real freedom doesn't come from autonomy. It comes from recognizing your eternal connection to your source. This isn't the dependency that the world teaches, where one person diminishes themselves to serve another. This is divine dependence, the acknowledgement that you were created by love, that you are sustained by love, and that your true power comes from your unity with all that is real. The ego has taught you that dependence equals weakness. But the Course teaches something radically different. Acknowledging your source is the ultimate strength. When you understand that you didn't create yourself, that you are held in existence by a love that will never fail, that you are part of an infinite whole rather than a separate fragment struggling alone, everything changes. The burden lifts, the anxiety dissolves, the loneliness transforms into profound connection. Think about what it means to truly depend on God. Not the God of fear and judgment that the ego has invented, but the source of unconditional love that created you perfect and whole. When you acknowledge this dependence, you're not losing yourself. You're discovering who you really are. You're not becoming weak. You're tapping into a strength that's infinite and eternal. You're not giving up control. You're releasing the exhausting illusion that you ever had to control everything in the first place. This is where the ego's lie becomes most obvious. The ego says that acknowledging your dependence on God means you're nothing, that you have no power, that you're diminished. But the opposite is true. When you recognize that you are an expression of infinite love, created by and forever connected to the source of all power, you discover that you have access to a strength the ego could never imagine. You're not a separate fragment fighting for survival. You're an integral part of the whole, supported by everything that is real. The difference between the ego's autonomy and the spirit's interdependence is the difference between isolation and communion, between fear and love, between exhaustion and rest. The ego says, you're on your own, so you must fight, defend, and prove yourself constantly. The spirit says, you are part of the whole, forever connected, eternally loved, and nothing real can be threatened. So how do you begin to release false autonomy and embrace this true freedom? It starts with honesty. Start noticing where you're exhausting yourself trying to be self-sufficient. Pay attention to the moments when you resist help, when you insist on doing everything yourself, when you feel that familiar burden of having to manage and control everything. In those moments, pause and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? What do I think I'll lose if I acknowledge I need support? Then take small steps toward trust. This doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or passive. It means recognizing that you don't have to carry everything alone. It means asking for help when you need it, not as a sign of weakness, but as an acknowledgement of truth. It means letting yourself be supported by others, by the circumstances of your life, and ultimately by the love that holds all things in existence. Practice releasing control in small ways. Notice how the sun rises without your effort, how your heart beats without your management, how life continues to unfold even when you're not orchestrating every detail. These are reminders that you are held, sustained, supported by something far greater than your individual efforts. And here's what you'll discover. The more you release false autonomy, the more powerful you actually feel. Not the ego's brittle, defensive power that must be constantly maintained, but the spirit's quiet, unshakable strength that comes from knowing you are connected to the infinite. The more you acknowledge your dependence on love, the freer you become. The more you trust in your source, the less you need to defend and prove yourself. This is the peace the world cannot give and cannot take away. It's the peace that comes from knowing you are not alone, you never were alone, and you never could be alone. You are forever connected to your source, to each other, and to the love that created you. And in that connection, you find a freedom that false autonomy could never deliver, a strength that isolation could never provide, and a joy that separation could never know. True freedom isn't found in standing alone. It's found in recognizing that you are part of something infinitely greater than your separate self could ever be. The journey from false autonomy to true freedom is one of the most profound shifts you can make in your understanding of yourself and your relationship with reality. A Course in Miracles is offering you something extraordinary here. The opportunity to lay down the exhausting burden of trying to be self-sufficient and to discover the infinite strength that comes from acknowledging your source. Remember, this isn't about losing yourself. It's about finding your true self. It's not about becoming weak. It's about discovering real power. It's not about giving up freedom. It's about experiencing a freedom so complete that the ego's version of autonomy looks like the prison it always was. Every day presents you with countless opportunities to choose again. When you feel that familiar tension of trying to control everything, you can pause and remember there's another way. When isolation tempts you with its false promise of independence, you can choose connection instead. When the weight of self-sufficiency becomes too heavy, you can allow yourself to be supported by the love that never fails. You don't have to perfect this immediately. You don't have to get it right every time. What matters is your willingness to question the ego's lies about autonomy and to remain open to the Spirit's truth about your eternal connection to everything real. Each small step away from false independence is a step toward genuine freedom. If this video resonated with you, if something shifted in how you see independence and connection, I invite you to leave a like. It helps this content reach others who are ready to question the ego's illusions and discover the peace that comes from true dependence on love. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Every day brings new content exploring A Course in Miracles, diving deep into the teachings that can transform how you experience every aspect of your life. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. And if you know someone who's exhausted from trying to do everything alone, someone who's trapped in the isolation of false autonomy, someone who's ready to discover that real strength comes from connection rather than separation, share this video with them. Share this truth. In teaching it, you'll strengthen it in yourself. Leave your comment below as well. Tell me, where in your life do you most struggle with false autonomy? What would it feel like to release that burden and trust in something greater than your separate self? I read every comment, and I'm genuinely grateful to know how these teachings are touching your journey. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Your willingness to explore these ideas, to question what you've been taught, and to remain open to a truth beyond the ego's lies is truly beautiful. I'll see you tomorrow with more A Course in Miracles. Until then, may you release the weight of false independence. May you discover the strength of divine dependence. And may you know, in every moment, that you are forever held in love. Thank you, and see you tomorrow.